He said it so quietly I almost missed it. If you can't cover your half, Mom, maybe sell one of those bracelets. I looked at him across the table. The restaurant was loud. Someone at the next table was laughing. The waiter had just refilled my water glass and walked away. My son was cutting his steak like nothing had happened. I picked up my purse from the back of the chair, set it in my lap, and held it there. I didn't say anything. I want to start from the beginning because the beginning matters. It always does, even when you don't realize it until much later. My name is not important. What's important is that I am 68 years old, and I spent 41 of those years believing that if you loved your family hard enough, worked quietly enough, asked for little enough, everything would be fine. I was wrong, but I didn't know that yet on the evening I married Raymond. I was 26. He was 31. We got married in September in a small church in Ohio, and afterward we ate cake in the church hall and danced to a song I can't remember anymore. What I remember is the way Raymond looked at me when I walked in. Like I was the only thing in the room worth looking at. Raymond was a good man. I want to say that plainly, because the rest of this story involves his son, our son. And I never want anyone to confuse what kind of man Raymond was with what kind of man our son turned out to be. Raymond worked for 30 years as a civil engineer. He was methodical, careful, and fair. He kept records of everything. He also had a habit of buying me jewelry, not expensive things, not at first, small things. A bracelet with a blue stone he found at a craft fair in 1989. A silver chain he bought from a man in a parking lot in Mexico on our anniversary trip. A pair of earrings he picked out himself for my 50th birthday, gold with a small pearl on each, which I wore to his funeral 14 years later, and have not taken off since. Raymond died of a heart attack at 66. He was shoveling snow. He'd been told by his doctor not to do it. He did it anyway because the neighbor across the street was elderly, and he didn't want her to slip on her walkway. That was Raymond. After he died, I was lost for a while. Not dramatically lost. I didn't stop eating or refuse to leave the house. I just moved through things without feeling them. I went to the grocery store, came home, put things in the refrigerator, couldn't remember what I'd bought. I called my sister twice a week. I watered my plants. I waited for something to feel normal again. My son Neil, he was 38 then, living 40 minutes away with his wife Colette and their 2 children, called me every Sunday. He came by once a month, sometimes more. In the first year after Raymond died, I thought we were close. I thought grief had brought us together. I did not understand at the time that Neil was doing arithmetic. He called on a Sunday afternoon in the spring, about 14 months after the funeral. He had an idea, he said, a business opportunity. His friend was opening a second location of a restaurant chain, and Neil wanted to invest. He needed $40,000. I don't have $40,000 in cash, I said. Dad's life insurance, he said. You have it. I did have it. I had not touched it. I was 63 years old, and I had not touched it because I did not know how long I would need it to last. I told him I needed to think about it. He said, of course, take your time. He was warm about it. He was patient. That is the thing about Neil that I still don't fully understand. He was never cruel in those early conversations. He was charming. He framed things as partnerships, as opportunities, as ways for me to be part of something instead of just sitting alone in the house. I gave him $25,000. The restaurant did not do well. Neil told me the location was wrong, the timing was bad, the market had shifted. I nodded. I didn't ask too many questions because I didn't want to seem accusatory, and because somewhere deep in me I still believed that my son was a good person making honest mistakes. 6 months later he called again. He needed help with his mortgage. Colette had cut back her hours to be home with the kids, and things were tight. Just a bridge loan, he said. He'd pay it back. I gave him $9,000. I did not keep a running total then. I wish I had. Over the next 4 years, there were more calls. Some were for his kids. Braces for the younger one. a sports camp for the older one, a car when the old one died. Some were for Colette. She wanted to start a small business, a candle and home goods shop. She needed startup money. I gave, not always the full amount asked, but I always gave something. The bracelet came up for the first time at my kitchen table. Neil had come over for dinner. I'd made his favorite, pot roast, the way Raymond used to like it. We were sitting at the table and he mentioned, casually, while picking at his food, that he was looking at investment properties. There was a duplex he was interested in. He needed a cosigner on the loan. "Neil," I said, "I can't cosign a loan." He looked at me. "Why not?" "Because I'm 66, because I'm on a fixed income." He was quiet for a moment. Then he looked at my wrist. "Grandma left you those bracelets," he said. "Those are worth something. Those bracelets belong to your grandmother. She left them to you." Yes, she did. He didn't say anything else that night. But I noticed him look at my wrist once more before he left. That summer, Neil invited me to his family's birthday dinner for Colette. A restaurant, a nicer one than we usually went to, downtown, white tablecloths. I dressed up. I wore Raymond's pearl earrings and the bracelet with the blue stone. I was glad to go. I thought it was a gesture of inclusion. I should have understood the dinner better before I walked in. We ordered. Everything on the menu was expensive in that particular way that expensive menus are. No prices listed at first, or the prices were listed in small print after you'd already decided. I ordered the salmon. Colette ordered the lamb. Neil ordered the steak. When the bill came, Neil picked it up, looked at it for a long moment, and then set it down. "Mom," he said, "I didn't realize it was going to be this much." I looked at the bill. I had my purse with me. "I can put in for mine," I said. "It's about 300 total." Colette was looking at her phone. "Okay," I said. He paused. "I thought maybe you could get all of it as a birthday gift for Colette." I looked at him. "And actually," he said, and this is when he said it, quietly, easily, like it was the most reasonable thing in the world. "If you can't cover your half, Mom, maybe sell one of those bracelets." He nodded at my wrist. I picked up my purse. I set it in my lap. I held it there. The waiter came and went. Colette laughed at something on her phone. Neil picked his fork back up and finished his steak. I sat there with my purse in my lap and thought about Raymond buying me that bracelet at a craft fair in 1989. He had paid $12 for it. He held it up to the light and said, "The color matches your eyes." Which wasn't even true. My eyes are brown, not blue. But I loved him for saying it anyway. I paid for my salmon. I left exact change for my portion of the tip. I said goodbye. I said happy birthday to Colette. I walked to my car. I sat in the parking lot for a long time. I was not crying. I was not angry, exactly. I was doing something I hadn't done in a long time. I was thinking clearly. On the drive home, I thought about the money. All of it. I added it up as best I could from memory. The restaurant investment, the mortgage help, the car, the braces, Colette's candle business. I didn't have an exact number. I knew it was more than $60,000. I was almost certain it was closer to $70,000. And he'd asked me to sell a $12 bracelet to cover a dinner bill. I went home. I made tea. I sat at Raymond's old desk in the small room we used to use as an office, and I opened the bottom drawer where I kept the things that mattered. The mortgage documents, the insurance paperwork, Raymond's death certificate, a folder I'd made years ago labeled simply Our Finances. I hadn't opened it in a long time. I sat there until midnight. What I found was not dramatic. There were no hidden accounts, no secret betrayals. What I found was simply the accumulation, every withdrawal, every transfer, every check I'd written, organized in the way Raymond had taught me to organize things. He'd been an engineer. He believed in records. $72,400. Over 4 years. To my son and his family. I closed the folder. I held it in my hands for a while. I thought about Colette's candle shop. I'd been in it once, the January after it opened. Cute little place. She'd given me a candle to take home. I burned it by the sink in the kitchen. It smelled like cedar. I thought about the duplex Neil was looking at. He'd texted me photos of it once. 2 units, front porch on each side, big backyard. I thought about the day Raymond died. I called Neil first. He came immediately. He sat with me in the kitchen while the neighbors started appearing with food, and he took care of things. Calls, arrangements, paperwork. I had been grateful. I had been so grateful. I don't think he was performing it. I think he really did love his father. I think some part of him loved me. I also think, after that night in the parking lot, that love had not stopped him from taking whatever I offered, and then from asking for more. And eventually from looking at the bracelet on my wrist and doing a quick calculation. I closed the drawer. I turned off the desk lamp. I went to bed. In the morning, I called my attorney. Her name is someone I won't mention here. She had handled Raymond's estate. She was thorough and plain-spoken, and she did not ask unnecessary questions. I told her I wanted to review my will, update the beneficiaries on my accounts, and I had some questions about setting up a trust. We met the following Thursday. The meeting took 2 hours. By the end of it, I had a plan. I removed Neil as the secondary contact on my bank accounts. I updated my will. I established a small trust, nothing dramatic, nothing elaborate, with clear instructions. Some would go to my sister, some to the church Raymond had attended, some to a scholarship fund at the community college in our county, because Raymond had once said, in passing, that he wished more kids from working families could afford engineering programs. When my attorney asked me if there was anything else, I thought for a moment. One more thing, I said. I want to make sure that no part of my estate can be contested on the grounds that I was mentally diminished. I want documentation that this was done while I was of sound mind and full decision-making capacity. She looked at me. That's a very common and very wise provision, she said. Raymond would have thought of it, I said. She smiled. Should I add that to the notes? Please. I left her office and went to the grocery store. I bought what I needed. I came home and put things in the refrigerator, and I remembered exactly what I'd bought. Something had shifted. The week after the meeting with my attorney, Neil called on Sunday as usual. We talked for about 15 minutes. He mentioned the duplex. I said I hoped it worked out. He mentioned that Colette's shop had a good month. I said that was great. He asked how I was. I said fine. Good. He did not ask me for anything that day. I think, somehow, he felt the shift. Or maybe I was just different on the phone. A little quieter. A little less eager. I'm not sure, but the call was shorter than usual, and at the end he said, "Love you, Mom." And I said, "Love you too." And both of those things were true. They were just no longer the whole picture. 2 weeks later, he called on a Tuesday, not Sunday, which was unusual. He said he needed to talk to me about something. He said the duplex deal had moved faster than expected, and he needed to move on financing quickly. He wanted to know if I'd reconsidered the cosign. I haven't, I said. A pause. Mom, I'm not going to cosign alone, Neil. That's my answer. Another pause. Longer. Is there something going on? He asked. Nothing is going on, because you seem different. I'm fine, I said. I hope the duplex works out. I mean that. We said goodbye. I hung up the phone and sat with it for a minute. My hands were perfectly steady. It had been 61 days since the restaurant. I did not call Neil the next Sunday. I waited to see if he would call me. He did, at 11 in the morning, and we talked for 10 minutes. Nothing about money. Mostly about the kids. His son had a soccer tournament. His daughter had a school play. I asked questions. I listened. It was fine. The calls got shorter over the next few months. I don't think he was punishing me. I think he was recalibrating. I think, on some level, He had been measuring my value in terms of what I could provide, and now that I had stopped providing it, he wasn't sure how to relate to me. That's the part that should have hurt more than it did. What hurt more, actually, was thinking about all the Sundays I had sat by the phone hoping he would call, all the times I had offered money before he even asked, because I wanted so badly to be useful to him, to be needed, to be the kind of mother whose son drove 40 minutes to see her not out of obligation, but because he wanted to. I have a mirror in the hallway. It's old. We bought it at an estate sale in 2002. The frame is painted white, and it's slightly too large for the wall. I passed it one morning in February, and I stopped. I was wearing Raymond's earrings. I was wearing the blue bracelet. I looked at myself for a moment. I was 68 years old, and I was standing in my own hallway, in my own house, and everything in that house was mine. I thought about something my mother used to say. She said it in the context of driving, actually about knowing when to pull over. She said, "You don't wait until the car breaks down. You pull over when you first hear the noise." I had heard the noise years ago. I had kept driving, but I had pulled over now. In the spring, I booked a trip. I had not traveled since Raymond died. We had always talked about going to Portugal. Raymond had read something about Lisbon once, and clipped the article and put it in a folder. I found the folder in the desk. The article was dated 2011. I booked a 10-day trip to Lisbon. Solo. When I told my sister, she was quiet for a moment and then said, "Oh, good." Just that. Oh, good. She knew, the way sisters know, that something had changed. I told Neil I would be traveling for a couple of weeks in May and wouldn't be available by phone. He said, "Oh, really? That's great, Mom. Where are you going?" "Lisbon," I said. A pause. "Portugal?" "Yes." "Wow," he said. "By yourself?" "Yes." He didn't say anything for a moment. "Then, is everything okay?" "Everything is fine," I said. "I'll send you a photo." I went to Lisbon. I stayed in a small hotel near the old city, 5 flights of stairs with no elevator, which I did not mind. I walked everywhere. I ate at tiny restaurants where no one knew me. I sat in a square on my 3rd evening there and had a glass of wine and watched the light change on the buildings. That particular evening light that Lisbon has, like the city, is made of amber. I thought about Raymond. I do this often. I have conversations with him in my head. Not in a strange way, just the way you talk to someone who knew you when you were young, who watched you become who you are, who would have opinions about everything that's happened since they left. I thought about what Raymond would have said about Neil. I think he would have been sad. I think he would not have been surprised. Raymond saw things clearly in a way that I sometimes didn't. He used to say that I had a gift for optimism that sometimes looked like a gift for ignoring what was right in front of me. He wasn't wrong. I sat in that square and I thought about the $72,000. I thought about the bracelet. I thought about the night I sat at his desk with the folder in my hands. And I thought something I hadn't let myself think before. I had done enough. Not just enough for Neil. Enough. For my whole life. 41 years of being a wife, 38 years of being a mother, 68 years of being someone who gave more than she held back. I had done enough. And whatever time I had left, 10 years, 20, I didn't know. It was mine to spend as I chose. I finished my wine. I walked back to my hotel. I climbed 5 flights of stairs. I took off Raymond's earrings and set them on the nightstand. I looked at them for a moment in the lamplight. He was right about the color. Not the bracelet. Those are blue. The earrings. With the light hitting them just right, the pearls had this particular warmth, this soft glow. And they didn't match my eyes exactly, but the warmth matched something. I turned off the light. When I got home from Lisbon, there was a card from Neil in the mailbox. Handwritten, short. It said he hoped I had a good trip. It said he missed talking to me. It said he was sorry if things had felt off lately. I read it twice. I set it on the kitchen counter. I didn't call him that day. I put away my suitcase, did my laundry, called my sister, watered my plants. A few days later, I called him back. We talked for 20 minutes. He asked about Lisbon, and I told him about the square and the light and the 5 flights of stairs, and he laughed and said, "Mom, you could have gotten a room with an elevator," and I said, "I know. I liked the stairs." He didn't ask me for anything. Neither of us mentioned a dinner. Neither of us mentioned the bracelet, or the money, or the cosign, or any of it. There was a version of this story where I would have needed him to acknowledge those things, where I would have waited for an apology before I allowed myself to breathe again. But I had already breathed. I had breathed in Lisbon. I had already made my decisions and signed the papers and put things in order. Quietly and thoroughly, the way Raymond would have done. The apology would have been nice. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But I had stopped waiting for nice. My sister came to visit in July. We sat on the back porch for 3 evenings in a row and talked the way we only talk when we're together in person. The long, circular conversations that go backward and forward in time, that start with something small and end up somewhere you didn't expect. On the last evening, she looked at my wrist and said, "You're wearing Mom's bracelet." "I always wear it," I said. "I know," she said. I hadn't noticed it in a while." I looked at it. The blue stone. $12 at a craft fair. Raymond holding it up to the light. "Nobody's selling it," I said. She raised her glass. "Nobody's selling anything." I raised mine. We sat there until it was dark. I write things down now. I have a notebook. Nothing fancy, a composition notebook from the drugstore, and I write in it when I need to think through something. It's not a diary exactly. It's more like the kind of record Raymond used to keep. Clear, organized, useful. I wrote down what I had given Neil, all of it. Not because I'm angry about it anymore, but because I want to know what I know. I don't want to confuse sentiment with fact. I wrote down what I have now. The house, paid off. The trust, established. The will, updated. The accounts, in order. I wrote down Lisbon in May. Stairs. Good light. Pearl earrings on the nightstand. I wrote down, I did enough. That's all. That's really all there is to say. I've thought a lot about cause and effect since that night in the parking lot. Not in an abstract way. In a very specific, practical way. The way Raymond used to think through a problem before he put pen to paper. You look at what happened. You trace it back. You don't lie to yourself about what you find. What I found was this. For 4 years, I had made it easy. Every time Neil called, I answered. Every time he needed something, I found a way. I told myself it was love. And it was. I don't want to take that away from myself. But it was also something else. It was a habit of making myself smaller so that the people around me could feel larger. I had been doing it so long, I didn't notice it anymore. It had just become the shape of my life. The bracelet was the noise my mother warned me about, not because it was worth anything in particular. It wasn't. $12 at a craft fair. Raymond held it up to the light and said something sweet that wasn't even accurate. But that bracelet was the moment I heard the noise clearly. Maybe for the first time. The sound of someone looking at what you love and seeing only what it might be worth to them. And the thing about that sound is that once you hear it, you can't unhear it. You start listening back through all the other moments, the restaurant investment, the mortgage help, the Sunday calls that always seemed to curve eventually toward whatever was needed that month. I hadn't been paying attention. Or I had been paying attention but choosing not to name what I saw. That is a different thing. And it requires a different kind of honesty to admit it. Tracing it back, I don't think Neil set out to take from me. I think he learned what was available, and he reached for it the way anyone does when a door stays open. That's not an excuse, but it helps me understand it without turning it into something it wasn't. He wasn't calculating from the start. He was just a person who had never been given a reason to stop, I gave him every reason to continue. The decision I made, the attorney, the trust, the accounts, Portugal, those weren't revenge. I want to be clear about that. There was no satisfaction in any of it that felt like winning something. What it felt like was orientation. Like I had been facing the wrong direction for a long time, and I had finally, quietly, turned around. That's what I mean when I say cause and effect. The effect of giving without limit is not gratitude, it is expectation. And the effect of stopping, not dramatically, not with a speech, just stopping, is that you find out very quickly what was real and what was arrangement. What I found out was that Raymond was still real. The bracelet was still real. The pearl earrings on the nightstand in Lisbon were real. My sister's voice on the porch in July was real. Neil was real too, somewhere under all of it. I haven't stopped believing that, but I stopped making it my job to excavate him. That is the hardest thing I have ever decided to do. Not the trust, not the attorney, not even Portugal alone. The hardest thing was deciding that my life, what remained of it, however much that was, did not need to be spent in service of someone else's comfort at the cost of my own. That I had already done enough. That enough was allowed to mean something. I wrote it in my notebook, and I still believe it. I did enough.